Hey Collective, it's Al, and today's video is going to be accompanying a post I'm putting out on LinkedIn this afternoon, which centers around the topic of partnerships and alliances. And what I really wanted to focus on was how that relates to what we consider conscious leaders and how that really affects their lives moving forward. Because what we're finding as a population is that we really can't continue down the path we're on with the divisiveness and the polarization of every possible topic known to the human universe. We seem to be at a crossroads where either we will implode or we will continue forward. And one of the byproducts of that experience is that there are a lot more people becoming more centered on the we as opposed to the I realities, which is how things truly affect us on a global scale, and are really focused on bridging gaps between different demographics and houses of worship and different personalities that are now stepping forward, being called to use their life experience in a way that brings harmony to chaos. And one of the byproducts that is truly sticking out to us as we make our way forward is that we can feel the back-building energy of the change that's needed. And we're starting to really feel that calling to be of greater service to humanity. And in that awareness comes a question that really, really kind of haunts us, which is who gets to come with us in what's unfolding? And since we're not allowed to necessarily pass judgment on another human being, we're having to really look at people for who they truly are. And that's why I pointed out in the piece that you let people be them and let them be wherever they are in the evolutionary ladder. But at some point you have to understand that some of them we're just going to have to let go of in our own personal lives, and how that really affects our business and professional existences as well. Because when we're stepping forward now, we're representing a higher way of thinking and being into humanity, and we're representing a unity that really isn't materialistically driven, but more driven by a higher purpose and a spiritual center that is asking us to set aside our differences and really put ourselves as the vessels for divine energy and divine will to actualize whatever it is that it's trying to actualize through us, whether it's more humanitarian effort or whether it's more global warming concern or whether it's about sexism, homophobia. I mean, any number of different areas in which we really need to kind of tackle the topic head on. There are people who are now representing those vessels that will be dealing with those specific areas. And so one of the things that does is that when you have industry leaders and people who maybe aren't for our highest good, they still can see where the natural evolution of humanity is going, and they can see that there is truth in what we're saying. And not only that, but they're starting to see that there's actual money to be made, and they're starting to see that this is inevitable. And so one of the cautions that we're being given as conscious leaders is to become aware enough of other people's intentions and motivations as to who they truly are, and acknowledge them for that instead of looking for what you think they will become, but actually acknowledging who they really are, and then navigating those seas of uncertainty with them. Understanding that there are certain things that we as divine beings and as conscious leaders cannot be tied to. And the strain that puts onto newly rising conscious leaders who have maybe never been in a situation where who they surround themselves has never really mattered to them before. It wasn't really witnessed by the world at large. Whereas where we're going now and stepping forward, it's going to become very clear to people who it is that you have in your inner circles and who you have in your networks and who you have in your businesses. Because one of the things that can really tear apart a mission, especially a divine mission, is alliances with people who cause nothing but chaos onto our world and distract us from our purpose and from our life purpose. And so one of the things that we as conscious leaders really need to start discussing is how we help each other stay strong in knowing that not everybody gets to come along. And how do we then identify that in a professional setting without alienating a bunch of people? Because for the longest time, the paradigm that we existed in, it was very clear. You had to kind of dance with the devil in order to get ahead. But now with the divine making itself so clearly known to have obliterated that paradigm, we're now realizing that we actually have to stay away from those individuals and possibly burn bridges in the process in order to keep the integrity to who we are and what we represent. And that creates a very strained dynamic between a lot of people, because we're starting to then have to take stock of how people live their lives without passing judgment, and to really look at them more strenuously and understanding that someone who is surrounded by alcoholism, for example, and you are a representative trying to help people overcome that vice, you can't then be surrounded by a bunch of people who drink all the time and party all the time. And so how do you then navigate the disconnect from those people that used to once mean a lot to you? And that's kind of a really hard place to be, but it's something that we as change leaders and conscious leaders are going to have to face together. Because as we step over the edge into the unknown and really, really become what it is that the divine wants for us, we're going to have to really look at not just our personal life and our professional life, but how we ourselves exist in this 3D experience. And one of the things that that does for humanity is it represents light in a very dark space. But part of that process is to then expand the light beyond where you are and take chances and be a vessel of learning and guidance. And so when we look at the conscious leadership, what we're actually tackling now is the alliances and how that can be a double-edged sword for who we are as people. Because there are people in our lives that we really, really love and adore, but who won't ever change. And since it's not our place to try and change them, sometimes we're just going to have to let that be and have to keep walking forward and hope that they will catch up when they're ready. And that takes a lot of strength and it takes a lot of integrity to do. But even more so when we start to talk about the topic of some of us having to then be public figures. Because what that does is it isolates you to a certain degree, making you feel like you can't live your life and you can't make mistakes. But anyone who's truly in alignment understands that you're going to still make mistakes. The question though is, who are you focused your energy on? Who are you attracting? And you become more self-aware of what that's saying about what the energy is we're putting out into the universe. And so when I was writing the piece, what I was really focused on was more on the business end, really, but I wanted to kind of extrapolate more on it from a personal standpoint, because a lot of people put the wrong emphasis in the wrong areas of life, focusing maybe in this context on maybe someone doesn't have the same economic background that we do, or come from a different religion, or come from a different race. And so we emphasize that we can't be seen with that type of people, not realizing that in such sentiment we are ourselves the problem, right? And so I'm just wanting to caution us as a species to remember that just because someone's different from you, which is why I began with the Bernice King quote, just because someone's different from you doesn't mean they're not on the same path you are. And so be wise enough to separate what public opinion will be of the situation for what purpose-related information will be needed, right? So what I'm saying there is, just because people might have a negative opinion of someone doesn't mean that that's the truth. In fact, a lot of the narrative has vilified some very good people for doing the right thing because it made more money. And so when you are a conscious leader, you have to then become more focused on identifying the truth of that person and where they're coming from, and understand if they are trying to do good for humanity or if they're being self-centered and materialistic. And that divide has to be made very clear in your own mind. But in personal spaces, one of the challenges that we have is the opposites attract each other. And what I wanted to speak to as a conscious leadership that kind of reads my work is this very simple. When we look at each other, don't look at the race, don't look at the religion, don't look at the overall opinion, look at the person. And really analyze if they are for your higher good or for humanity's higher good. And what that takes is some getting to know them. Before you sign contracts in your business life, you always get to know the person. You go out, you speak, you do business calls, you do all of that to really get at the crux of the person before you ever sign them onto your brand, right? So why aren't we doing the same thing in our personal lives? And so dating becomes a lot more complicated because many of you, and I do mean many of you, are going to be stepping up in the evolutionary ladder, and you're going to possibly be thrust upon the world in some form of way. And the people that you are then attracting will either be motivated by the money that you're going to be acquiring as you move forward, or maybe actually more jealous of you than you think and are actually there to sabotage you as lessons that then become blessings down the road. So in those personal contexts, we start to get into a lot trickier dynamic, because when you look at a very powerful emperor and empress couple in the world, what you realize is they marry each other in a sense that they have opposition, but they still have core values. And the most successful unions, divine unions that exist, are built upon that dynamic, which is they're different in extreme ways in certain ways, but when it comes to their truth and what they're trying to do in their life and who they are and their value system and their morals, they share them identically. And that's something that we as conscious leaders need to start discussing and start educating other people to do, because what it does is that it helps them rise, right? It's some people have this in the materialistic world, at least. They have this idea that it's who you know. But in truth, it's who you surround yourself with. And a lot of it has to do with, let's say that someone is an industry leader and you really admire them, but the people within their house are greedy or corrupt or whatever it is. You can't really then attach yourself to the head of that entity because of the representation of who they surround themselves with, because there's something in that they're still learning. And so since we don't judge it, we just learn to, okay, we're going to keep our eye on this person and we're going to make sure that their integrity is intact. And what we're going to do professionally is then, when we're sure that their house is clean, we can then band with them and form alliances, right? And the same is true for our own personal life. And one of the things that happens, or one of the bigger challenges, I should say, for conscious leaders, is we really want the best for humanity. That's one of the great things about conscious leadership, is you have a lot of hope and empathy for the world. But in your personal dynamics, we have this way of forgiving more than we probably should be forgiving in another person's lifestyle, right? Now, I'm not speaking to if someone drinks every now and then or parties or whatever. We don't castigate other people. But what I'm saying is, what is their MO? Are they literally generating just money so that they can, live that lavish lifestyle and be outward about it, and their whole life is surrounded in the material world? Then as a spiritual leader or a conscious leader or a change leader, is that really someone that we want to be associated with in a personal dynamic? Because what it then ends up doing is that professionally it has ramifications to other true conscious leaders who are keeping an eye on you without you knowing it. And that's one of the big secrets to what's going on in the world, is that a lot of very powerful people who are on the rise are being observed in order to make sure that they are studied. Remember, if you've seen my recent post, you understand that even in the dreamscape, they've made it very clear to me that there are people on the higher consciousness observing me, and what happens above happens below. And so understand that will then manifest into our 3D experience, where other people who are interested in partnering you are observing the way you carry yourself, who you surround yourself with, and what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis. Because you never know how powerful someone is that's observing you, because of the fact that we as conscious leaders put our work out into the world. And we don't know who observes us. We don't really know who's even thinking of considering us for a position or an opportunity. We don't know that consciously. But what we're putting into the world does reflect what we are about in our internal world. And so that's a very interesting dynamic for conscious leadership to be very aware of, is that it's not just business and it's not just pleasure. It's a dynamic between the both, and it's that polarity that creates who you are and how you represent yourself into the external world. But again, one of the cautions with that is that we have to be careful to understand the difference between that parallel to the truth of someone. Because I've noticed that very powerful people sometimes will overlook the diamond in the rough because they're listening to other people's opinions as to whether or not that person is a viable investment. And the person already knows. We already know internally if someone is in alignment with us, or we already know that this person is going to pay out, as they say, dividends and interest and all of that stuff. We know that, but we allow the people around us to influence that opinion, forgetting that it is the divine intuition that is telling you, bet on this person. So you see how the people that surround you and your alliances and partnerships can also then screw you over in the long run, because they will make you overly cautious of something that is very plain for you to see. I recently heard a brilliant woman say, I can't remember, I think it was Water Star Vibes. She made a very clear comment about what you know naturally may be someone else's awakening. And that's a very true statement of all human beings, is that what we consider everyday life experiences and the skill sets and the wisdoms that we have may seem ordinary because we're living that experience, but that doesn't mean that it's not magical to someone who doesn't possess that same skill set. And so when we align ourselves in business or in pleasure as conscious leaders with people who aren't in the same alignment as you are as you move up the ladder, then you start to rob yourself of experiences and perfect mates because you're allowing the influence and opinions of others to corrupt what the divine is trying to hand you as a person. I remember specifically the other day, I was talking to someone that I really, really was impressed by. And what I remember about the interaction was that we were like really into each other as far as talking. It was just friendship. But one of the friends had a very negative reaction to one of the posts I'd posted up here about the dream I'd had about the about the karmic quartz, and they like absolutely didn't like me. And so what the person did is that they walked away from me, and I think it was like a week later. Finally, I hear back from them, and they explained to me. But what they don't realize is in the fact that they were so swayed so easily, what it revealed to me is they probably weren't going to be very loyal. And so you see how something so small actually kind of screwed something up. Because for me, what I'm looking for is long-term affiliations and connections. I'm not trying to build a necessary organization. I'm trying to build a network of change leaders and conscious leaders who are going to step forward and do great things for humanity. They're going to set aside their differences. They're not going to sit there and worry about how much money they're going to make off of it, because what they're doing is they're doing something for humanity, for themselves in the process. And so what it did for me is it made me very clear and stand on the mountain alone that I definitely will need loyalty in the future to come. And so notice how whatever that could have been, the potentiality that was there in friendship is no longer, because my truth is I need to make sure that who I surround myself is in alignment, is loyal, is protective, because I mean you're always protective of your friends, and that of all things love each other on a personal, interdynamic, and on a spiritual level. So that's a lot to take in. But as a spiritualist or as a conscious leader, there's no room for that not to be the case for me because of where I'm going. And like I said, there's so much energy behind not just you and me interacting and connecting to each other, but there's a lot that's coming that I can feel intuitively, like right on the cusp of, which is why I wrote that I was on the edge. It's because I can see the unknown, but what I can't see is how it gets there. And so in that parallel is where I started to really analyze who was going to come with me, if anybody. Because one of the things that you do along the path to conscious leadership is you really start to take stock of your mistakes and the people that you've kind of sold yourself out for. And you start to really realize that they're just people that can't come back into your life. So now imagine what that is moving forward as a conscious leader. And that's what I'm trying to aim us for. Because when we build the dream, we're not just building an abstract thought. It's a divine wish for humanity and specifically for us to manifest on its behalf. And so when that happens, you start to get more and more pieces to the overall puzzle, and your aim becomes clearer and clearer and clearer. So if you ever aspire to be of service in a way that is in a world leader position, then understand that you must behave, you must carry yourself, you must genuinely hold that integrity, you must surround yourself with that type of energy, and you must make sure that you don't become jaded by your past in order to do it. But that doesn't mean you take the past with you. You have to let it go in order to step forward. So there's all this fascinating stuff going on in the dynamic of what it is to be a conscious leader, because it doesn't just affect the dream. What it does is it makes it more detailed. And you start to really have to know what it is that you're looking for in business partners and lovers and friend circles and all of that stuff. Because at the end, you don't want yes men surrounding you all the time, but you want the people that are going to say no to you to have our, not mine, but our best interest in mind as a race. And you need that almost tension to exist between two parties, right? That's one of the great things about love, is that that's why opposites attract each other. It's because that tension is what keeps, it's the gluey part that makes it always interesting to talk to each other, and you never bore out of the relationship. And so when you're looking at that, you really have to be clear on what it is that the divine is willfully putting into your environment so as to also test you. And to know that sometimes what looks like the perfect contract is in league with the devil. Not literally, but you know what I mean. It's very dramatic, but we're being dramatic for this piece. But you have to be aware enough to know the motivations of the person then coming towards you, because they know you are the diamond. You are the diamond, conscious leaders. And that's for all of humanity. Those of you who are evolving and changing and becoming whatever it is the boss wants for you, you're becoming the diamond. And so what that does is it doesn't just attract light, but it also attracts people who want to take advantage of that. And one of the dangers that is speaking to is the belief that changed leaders, conscious leaders, and divine beings are naive. Here's the thing about naivety. There's a difference between purity and naivety. Make a clear distinction between the two before you approach a divine being, because a divine being will naturally read through it. And that is not a good place to be. I'm just telling you right now, because one of the things that I learned along my path is sometimes you allow the person to do whatever it is that they're about to do, to betray you or hurt you or whatever it is, because you know that there's a tally that's watching very closely as to everyone who does anything to you. And so you're just like, I can't change this. I'm going to have to walk through this shadow. But okay, I mean, do your thing. And then when all of the negative karma comes back at them, then they're mad at you. And you're just like, well, you came to me. And so all I did is I said, okay, I talked to you, and then, you did what you did. And, like there's all the little snarky little things like that. But divine beings look incredibly naive, but I assure you, it's not naive. It's part of the divine plan. So with all that said, the overall point to the piece is that conscious leaders have a different standard of operations, because you do represent something so unique and so divine that a lot of other people don't even really understand the vibration to which you are speaking from or that you live your life from. And so when you align yourself in partnerships and especially in personal and business relationships, understand that the other people have to vibrate somewhere near where you're vibrating. If you are like me, who's trying to bring unity to leadership and trying to make people really come to the table intellectually and remove the emotional entanglement of the conversation and really kind of start resolving issues on a collective level, then you're going to have a much higher standard to someone who is just trying to do the best in their life, right? There are things you're willing to let slide in your personal dynamic when you're not in front of the world for whatever XYZ reason. But for those of us who have a higher calling, your expertise as a life experience is now being called forth to bring people to you, not to lead them necessarily, but to bring harmony to their pain and to provide the wisdom that will open the doors that will let them free of the horrors and the shadows that exist within that pent-up hostility and pent-up rage. And so sometimes what that requires of you is a lot of sacrifice and not really being able to be the child anymore. Like every now and then I want to go out and I want to party, but I can't do that. And it's an absolute. The boss has been very clear with me that I can't do that anymore. And so I remember thinking very specifically, well, I have a higher calling, and in truth, it really wasn't serving me, and so it helped me evolve. But what I'm saying is that as conscious leaders, that's something that we really need to start discussing with each other. Because one of the things that happens, even in intimate friend circles, is that we don't ever want to allow any miscommunication or misrepresentation of who we are in the dynamic. Because what ends up happening is that, let's say, I'll give you a perfect example, and it's very candid. I'm going to trigger somebody, but that's fine. Anyone who is attached to the Epstein matter is not allowed to be anywhere near me. I don't want any affiliation with them, and anybody that's affiliated with those people will not be part of my family. They will not be part of anything that I build in the future. I do not tolerate anything that has to do with child molestation, trafficking, or anything like that. So what it did is it made me have to face a very dark shadow, which is some people that I admire, I will have to let go of. And that's something that I had to be willing to do in order to then stand in my truth and be able to walk towards you all and be so candid about my life and where we're going and what my beliefs are and so forth, is because I don't ever want to come across hypocritical. And one of the things that is because I don't know any other way to be than authentic. And I don't know any other way than to be genuine and empathetic and caring and compassionate for people. But there are things in the world that I won't allow because they're not They're not in alignment with bringing joy, harmony, integrity, and all of that stuff to our world. It doesn't help us evolve to be associated with people who are known rapists or people who are child predators or even suspected for that. And we have to then be very conscious of the fact that we can't judge someone unless they've actually been through the court system. So, but that doesn't mean that on an integrity level, we as conscious leaders are then going to allow that type of behavior around us. And they're very difficult conversations to have because in an interpersonal friendship dynamic, it would be made very clear to whoever I'm connecting with that that is an absolute no. I don't care if you're hosting a party and you want me to go because it can open a door for me. If this person's there, I'm not going. I want nothing to do with that. And that's not something I'm willing to compromise. And so you see that the bravado that is required sometimes to stand your ground and to be very clear on it. Because all that would be needed in that situation is to me passing by this person, that they capture a picture with me and somehow, whatever it is, I mean, this is like if I somehow became public, but let's say that I'm caught in the same image with the person, then they can say whatever they want about me being affiliated with them when I have nothing to do with it. So then the side that is part of that situation would then use it against, you see what I'm saying? So there's all of these things that we don't think about necessarily because we're trying to live our day-to-day lives, but that require long-term vision and requires a clear dedication to being the best being you can be on behalf of the divine. And the divine is very unforgiving of hypocrisy and that level of corruption, right? And so as conscious leaders, these are conversations that we're needing to have. And so the alliances and partnerships that we then gravitate to and that are gravitating towards us need to have that extra scrutiny so as to make sure that what we're all trying to do is be of service. Not to them making money, because people who want to make money off of what we're doing, I mean, investors, that's fine, but they're not part of the mission, right? And so you have to then be even clearer as to what role they'll be playing in this scenario, because at the end of the day, I'm not dancing with the devil to represent divine light. That's not going to happen. I'm going to dance with the divine beings who are trying to do it for the right reasons, and what we're going to do is really influence the way the business is operated and what it means to succeed in spite of that old paradigm. And that takes a lot of courage, but it also just takes awareness to be conscious of who it is that we're dealing with from day to day. And the other thing that I notice about that, when it comes to alliances and partnerships, there are always going to be people who at some point, not always, hopefully at some point, hopefully humanity will stop being jealous of each other, because it's just, I find it silly, because everyone has their own strengths and gifts, and miracles happen to everybody. But one of these days we're going to find that we don't need to really be jealous of each other, but there are going to be people that you align with in these new partnerships and alliances that really are trying to help humanity, that have people who work for them that are still pretty good people, but who are not going to like you because you are, I don't know, gifted or threat or whatever it is. And so you then have to put that into focus as well and be like, well, I'm not going to not deal with this person who I absolutely love and adore and who is on the right mission just because this other person doesn't like me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's like levels to how we navigate these seas. And so it becomes kind of one of those fascinating puzzle pieces, if you will, where you really, as conscious leaders, have to really project yourself into every scenario and walk it in a circle going, okay, well, I can see that this person is going to be an issue. Okay, they want me to be part of their company and they want me to be affiliated with them, but I know that these two people can't stand me. Well, okay, but this person's actually, they're really all about, humanity, and they're trying to bring unity, and they're trying to bring evolution, and they're trying to do it in the right context without breeding hate or all of the other stuff. So, you know what, I'm going to have to deal with. I'm going to have to just go with it. I'm going to take the leap of faith. I'm going to partner with this person who I know on my soul level is in alignment with me, and I'm just going to have to deal with whatever's in the house. Now, on the other side of that, if I'm the person who's bringing a divine being or a conscious leader into my walls, into my life experience, into my life, then I'm going to have to be aware of the people who don't like that person because I'm actually picking them. And again, that's where you're going to have to stand on the mountain by yourself and be like, no. I've decided this, and since I'm the head of this particular organization, this person is coming in, and I would be very cautious of how you treat this person because I care about them. You see what I'm saying? So there's like all of this passion and stuff that needs to be required. But one of my favorite things that I thought about this morning as I was contemplating the piece that I was writing was the dynamic between divine beings who come together on a personal and business front. Oh, that's a whole paradise waiting to happen. Because what I've noticed with conscious leaders is that you naturally are going to be attracted to people who represent the same value system as you do. And you're going to realize that they are completely opposite of you. And more often than not, people in your circle that you are part of currently, not part of where you're going, are not going to like the person that you are attracted to. And so it creates this whole thing where then you then in the inner dynamic then have to look at the quality of your friendships, and you kind of have to be like, wait a minute, my heart and my soul is telling me that this is my forever partner. Like, I know that I can raise my kids with this person. I know that they're going to return dividends in our business, in our professional life. But what I'm interested in is that this is the person I'm going to die with. This is the person that I know in my heart of hearts that represents love and every compassionate, empathetic thing that will heal my heart. I can feel it because the divine is telling me, what do I do now? Because I'm not going to have this person who I really care about target my better half. I'm not going to do that. You see what I'm saying? So alliances and partnerships becomes very dynamic in the sense that we really have layers in which we must operate. And we really have to understand the complexity to what it is that we represent. Because for the longest time, before this moment, before you hear this or read the article or whatever it is, we've all just been doing our best to be the best representative of ourselves and to be in divine alignment. But I'm promising you that something is about to happen that's going to bring a lot of you who were kind of in the shadows forward in order to represent your story and to be somehow of service to humanity. And so in that exchange, what I'm saying to you is that we need to start thinking long term and really need to start weighing the pros and cons to what it is we're asking. Because one of the things that this all revealed to me when I was thinking about it, I was pretty much up all night about it. Not all night, but I was because I could feel that someone has a lot of interest in me. And I could feel that I really would have a lot of interest in them. But what I was dealing with was kind of the ramifications of the amount of energy that was coming towards me. And I was very flattered, but it opened a doorway to conscious thoughts that I hadn't considered before. Which is, what if this person, my partner, my lifelong partner, let's say, that was a hypothetical that it came through emotionally, was, okay, what if this is my lifelong partner and they are workaholics? Am I willing to give up our connection in order to be of service to humanity, understanding that the love will still be there, and that though we may not always be together, that I'm still connected to the right person, and how do I attract that energy? Or am I going to be very clear with this person that if we're going to do this, then we're going to have to put in a lot of effort to make sure that you and I spend quality time together, because some of what will happen for us as a conscious leadership is that couplings will start to take shape. And they will be divine vessels that are brought together because not just because of what they're doing independently, but because of the power of this third thing that they're about to build in their interpersonal dynamic and in their professional lives. And so in that exchange, I literally was given this clear image as to a question, which was, how much of my relationship am I willing to give to the cause? And if I'm willing to give it all to the cause, then why be in the relationship? And versus, what if I give my all to being in the relationship and somehow incorporating each other into our business affairs so as to ensure that we're always in tandem to some degree without being codependent? And so it opened up this whole different dynamic that had to be walked through by first considering alliances and partnerships. You see what I'm saying? So one breadcrumb, one fleeting thought opened the door to a bigger Pandora's box, if you will, which was, well, what about my children? What about our children? What if they already have children? I mean, we're going big, right? That's conscious leaders, we're going big. And I'm specifically now dealing with the people who are on the rise, because the others that are looking at this are just understanding what I'm saying, but the people who are new, like I am to it, to being on the edge and going, okay, we're about to jump, there's no turning back. Okay, well, what does that mean? And so what about our kids? Like, what if they already have kids? Am I just a stepdad? Like, do I have to, like, kiss ass to the axe? Like, all of those dynamics need to be thought out before you get there, which luckily I did think about it. And I was like, well, I don't mind being the stepdad because I will have my own kids. Okay, well, what about my kids? What are we going to do with that mixed family? And then the next question was, Well, what about the other exes? Who's the parent of the other kid? Well, they're gonna have to, you know what I mean? Like, it was such a bigger scope to where all of this could possibly go that I had to sit in that headspace and be like, okay, that's something I'm willing to do. That is not a challenge to me. And that's what the revelation was to me by the end of it, because I was thinking of partnerships and alliances. It was like, that's not something I'm sacrificing. That's something I'm just going to work with. Like, I'm willing to deal with someone's ex if they are the parent of the children. I'm going to be totally, like, even if it's not the greatest dynamic, I'm still going to give them ownership and credence to the fact that that's their parents. And so I started to really branch out as a conscious leader because I was conscious of all of the possibilities. And the other one that I thought was really funny that I'll share with you guys is sometimes when you're a conscious leader and you're stepping forth to do something very big for humanity, or even if it's something small, but something that actually moves a lot of people in community and actually represents a demographic of love and light and all of that stuff, the partners, exes of the person that you're now engaging with suddenly become entangled into your experience. So you have to be also very aware of that dynamic, and when you walk into it, understand that when you have partnerships and alliances with other people, exes, whether it's in business or people who were previously in business with them who had a falling out, or the exes like husbands and wives or whatever it is, can then become part of your world, and you have to be willing to walk that path in order to be successful in your mission. So when it was all said and done, as you guys can see, this is a wide, booming scenario in which all I'm asking you as a reader or as a viewer to this piece to understand is that when you dream big, especially on behalf of someone who's dreaming big for you, the divine, whatever you believe it to be, then really sit in the space of what it means to be in partnership or alliance with others, and really clearly define what the parameters and boundaries will be, because you need to be very representative of who you are, and you must stand in that integrity. Remember, the boss does not like hypocrisy. So be very clear, okay, in business, this is things that I will compromise, but you won't know that part until you first identify what it is that you're willing to be in alliance with, and partnership with. And so it's part of what leadership in general is. But because of the extra emphasis on so much that needs to change in our world for the betterment of our people, that we're really now having to step up the game, if you will, and really kind of put ourselves in a long-term trajectory. If we really want to bring the world together, then how do we do that without first identifying who it is that we're willing to work with and who we're not? For example, some people may not want to work with Putin, ever. Yeah, I'm just going to put that out there. Some people don't want dictators. Okay, so to be very clear, you're not going to work with anybody who's affiliated with dictators, but understand what I just said. I didn't say just that dictator. I said anybody who's working with that dictator. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it breeds a little bit of hypocrisy into your world. And so just be very clear with what you're willing to do and what you're not. Because when things happen, when opportunity meets expertise, it's go time. The camera's on, there's no turning back. You need to have thought this all out. And that's one of the blessings to what conscious leadership gives us as humanity, is that we're already self-aware, making us the conscious leader. So we have already thought this stuff out. And so even things that are affiliated to that we didn't necessarily foresee will still be manageable because we already took care of the bigger pieces to the puzzle. And that's what the whole piece was about. You know, when it's all said and done, not everybody gets to go with where you are going, right? And it's one of those harsh decisions that really sometimes doesn't even have much to do with you. Because if you've been reading my work, you know that the divine, especially if you're a conscious leader, will immediately get rid of anybody who's not for your highest good, and will kind of surround you with protection. And so in that space, you still have to then make sure that you don't open any doors that don't need to be open to people from the past that are just trouble, or people who are just gunning for you because they're jealous, and all of that other stuff. And you need to then just be able to look at the situation and go, no, we're good. How do you do that? And so that's what conscious leadership is all about. That self-awareness to how do you represent the best example of yourself without being compromising of who you are and who you're attracting, and then make sure that you take stock as to what they're about so as to ensure that they're not going to screw up your overall aim. Because I've seen people who are incredibly powerful divine beings who have inadvertently become attached to someone who is super corrupt, almost because of a blind, willful ignorance to the truth of who that was. And then when it got revealed, not only did that entire empire go crumbling down from the person who was the bad, negative person. But it also took down part of the home or part of the castle to the person next to them. And that's what affiliations and partnerships can do in business. And so it's just something that I wanted us as a collective to be aware of, because many of you have so much to look forward to in the world. The bottom line question that came through all of this is, are you willing to sacrifice that, believing that you can change someone around you? And then be surprised when that person that you cannot change to begin with demolishes everything you've put all of your energy into. And if you're not willing to do that, then you've got to let them go. And that's kind of the overall point. I know it's a heavy, but it's something that we just needed to discuss. And I'm sorry I'm all shiny, but I let the camera be. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope this actually is of service to you. Have a great weekend.